1.02, approval of the January 22nd Policy Committee draft meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. So 1.03, public comment. We don't have anyone here. So 1.04, policy 111, school and workplace safety.
So policy 111, school and workplace safety, came up during conversation about policy 410 when the policy committee met in November, on November 2024. The discussion at the time was to decommission the policy 410 and merge the content into policy 111. The plan was to have a draft ready for this meeting for the policy committee to review. And Mr. Blundell, who is here, can speak a little bit more about this if you want to come up. At the end of January, before we finalized any edits, there were some recent guidance issued by MSDE that bears on the fire drill and school and workplace safety policies. And I'll let Mr. Blundell speak a little bit more about that. But because of that, we opted not to try and rush and incorporate that guidance. We felt it was more prudent to just hold off. We'll reschedule this for the March Policy Committee, and we'll have a draft proposal for you at that time.
So legislation was issued regarding particularly active assailant drills, but it speaks to also lockdown drills, which to me incorporates a lot of the drills that we do. And that legislation required Maryland Center for School Safety to issue out appropriate guidance. And on January 30th, they notified the state superintendents that the guidance is all schools that conduct active assailant drills and or lockdown drills are required to send out surveys to students, parents, staff members, and administrators. So all the requirements that they're making as far as things that the school systems need to do, are required to do, like Mr. Billivis said, we'd like to incorporate into the new policy 111.
And I rewrote the policy. So I can give you
Sure.
I mean, not, I shouldn't say I rewrote it. I just took the language that was there, refined it. Happy to give you that language. But I had forgotten that we were incorporating the two, so I actually did another purpose statement for the fire drills. So if you'd like that, I'd happy to give that to you too.
Sure, certainly.
Okay.
And what you put with fire drills, can that be broadened to all types of safety drills?
Sure, it could be just like we talked about, be incorporated into 111.
Measure?
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah,
You
without any
I
trouble.
don't know. You guys can figure out
Yeah,
whether or not that
when you do the
language-
red line version, I'm sure it can easily be
Yeah.
incorporated in there, no problem. Thank you, Nancy.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Could you, just for our own general information, there are so many different, there are many drills. What are the many drills that we do?
The required drills, there are 15 total drills that schools are required to conduct throughout the school year, 8 fire drills that are directed from fire marshal and officer of life safety, and then there are 7 other drills, and so it's lock down, evacuate, shelter in place, drop, cover, and hold, active assailant,
Which one does tornado fit in?
Weather?
to be severe weather or shelter. So there are a number of, and I apologize, I'm not.
That's okay. No, I put you on the spot there,
7
so-
other there. I know there are a total of 15 that are
Okay.
conducted throughout the school year.
And when we send out, say we send out a find out first, and just again for information, when they see lockdown or they see hold, what are the differences between those? When we send that out, that we've got a school on hold, but sometimes it'll say we've got a school on lockdown.
So the hold is actually a methodology that we use, a standard response protocol that's adopted from the I Love You Guys Foundation. And hold can be very, very minor. It can be, someone has gotten sick in the front vestibule, and so we place that area on a hold while our custodial staff cleans it up, just because we don't want people walking through it and tracking it all through the building, all the way to, we have a situation in an area of the building, and we just don't want people moving into that area or moving out into the hallways. So hold in your area or classroom, and stay there. There are announcements that we give, guidance we give to staff that here's what the announcement you should make over the PA. And it's typically hold in your area, stay in your classrooms until advised further. The lockdown there's a very serious concern, safety concern, either directly on school campus, very nearby to the school building, or within the building. And that lockdown is, lockdown locks lights out of sight. It's a very brief, quick information to the staff that we want you to go into this protocol and remain there until further advised. But the messaging that goes out, we work very well with public affairs so that the schools have what we call quick hitter messages that are very brief to send them out. We have an incident at our school, we're aware of, we're handling it, and more information to come. Just so that the community is aware, because we're not going to get out ahead of social media. And a lot of times people are videotaping or pictures and things like that. And it's just to make them aware. And then the hope is within the next 10, 15, 20 minutes, we can provide additional details to the community of what that incident involves and the actions that we're taking. So the announcement in the buildings, we're giving very quick announcements to our staff and our students and occupants of the building of this is the protocol we want you to move into, hold, secure, lock down, evacuate, or the active assailant. And then the messaging out to the communities, we have pre-planned templated messages that the school can send out or central office staff can send out for the school that announces and acknowledges the incident, and then follow-ups are more details involving the incident.
I think Dr. Lebo might have had.
Well, I was just going to add, and in those messages is hyperlink to the I love you guys. So it outlines what a hold is. That's hyperlink, so you can click hold and it explains what that means.
Thank you for that. The reason I asked is I thought it would be prudent to incorporate that in our definitions. Because this is where, when you think about it, the public goes to policy. They may not go to regulation, they may not dive any deeper, but I think it would be good to have those in our definitions of our policy. I get that a lot from people when they get those messages. What does the hold mean? What's the difference? I think that would be good to be contained in our definitions.
We can certainly incorporate them. We typically don't include a definition unless the term is referenced somewhere in the policy. But I can see about how to make sure we.
Yeah, I think we could incorporate just a paragraph that says here are the various types of.
I would probably put that in the regulation, because those have changed even in the last 10 years. And school systems actually can use any terms they want. Those are the recommended ones, but you worry if we put something in there, it could be sort of more permanent than it needs to be?
The protocols are they're endorsed by the Maryland Center for School Safety. It's what
so
FCPS has adopted.
They could change them.
They do update them, review them, and update them. The I Love Gas Foundation update them, and they've made slight modifications. We do have on our page, the SEMD page, Safety and Emergency Management Department page, hyperlinks to all those information. That's a lot of times where we pull them from to send out messages, or the schools pull them from to send out. So I think we can probably work something in as far as the
Or
definitions of
at least work it into the body of the policy that the hyperlink's not down at the bottom. It's actually easily accessible. I do get that question a lot when people get those find out first.
Do the teachers still have like booklets, or flip charts in their class to remind them what each one is and what you do?
They
Parts
actually
all
have
over the place.
Yeah,
Right.
they have
I was gonna say-
they have the posters, and they have 11 by 17 posters that hang all over the rooms, and then there's larger ones. We've gone away from the flip books,
Okay.
just so that it's less for them to have to go through, like it's.
That's what I was gonna say. And a lot of these are reactive. So my first job was at Twin Ridge Elementary, which was required shelter in place because of a fertilizer factory near there. And, we never had to have a shelter in place because of that, but one time, one of the county vehicles came and their tire was on fire, in our parking lot. And we actually had to evacuate because, kids went to the hospital. It was so noxious, it was terrible. And the kids would always say, just in regular like fire, is this a drill? Meaning, is this a real fire is what they would mean, but they would say, is this a drill? I'd be like, yes, it's a drill. A drill is a practice. We don't know if it's real or not, but that's why we practice. But pretty much every school, we had some kind of small fire. Tuscarora, we got booted out of the school one time, and not everybody had their coats and things, so that's why you practice, but it's often reactive. Obviously, we didn't used to have active shooters. I remember the first time they had to have an earthquake drill, it's like, oh, okay, but that's kind of get in the hall, tornado kind of thing, so.
So anything further? What else do you need from us?
And there's no action to be taken.
Okay, yeah, we just wanted to have a discussion about this, get it ready for the deadline version, and
And we're still combining the two.
Yes, we're still going to decommission 410, which is the next policy on the policy committee agenda. We're still decommissioning 410.
Nancy's got her thoughts in writing that she can share. She got her writing already ready for you, she can share, and then
Take the help.
we can move on to the next step. And you want to just jump into,
good.
since we're
You've gone through it.
decommissioning 410, you want to just knock that out?
Yep. So 410, we discussed as part of our conversation about policy 111. This was presented back in November. We are proposing to decommission it. We obviously it couples with 111, so we don't want to decommission or approve decommissioning before the new language is presented. So it'll just pair with it and come and ride along the coattails.
Okay. If it's all right, I am going to take one bit since we kind of blew through it. I was going to ask our visitor.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
okay.
Were you interested in giving public comment?
I'm not, no.
Okay, just wanted to make sure, because we kind of blew through it since there wasn't anybody here, but thank you for being here.
Appreciate it, thank you.
All right, so we'll move on to 1.06, Policy 441.
Policy 441 is transportation of students. This was also presented on November 20th, 24 to the Policy Committee for information and discussion. The discussion at the time was over incorporating references to the Student Code of Conduct, providing clarity on what it means by exceptional conditions, a statement regarding expectations on bus route cancellations, and a statement with respect to crossing guards. So working our way through the edits, obviously we've applied the new template. We have clarified the policy purpose statement. We've added 5 definitions, including one for emergency exceptional condition. We've articulated the policy statements that were previously in place are largely still there. We have added an additional policy statement, and that is that the preferred method for transporting students to and from school and while on field trips or other school-sponsored events is by way of an FCPS bus. This comes up because from time to time it is necessary to transport kids in a personal vehicle. We've had principals or other staff members transporting kids. We can't outright ban it because it is necessary from time to time, but we included this as a way to encourage not using that unless it's absolutely necessary. There are liability issues with doing that. There are workers' comp related issues potentially with allowing for transport by staff directly in their personal vehicles. So we just wanted to incorporate a statement from the board that the preference is you take our bus. We'll transport you on a bus. We don't need you to transport. And that message is to staff, not necessarily to the family, the parents. In the implementation section, again, this is largely, organized a little differently, but still basically the same. We've now broken it down into the expectations for FCPS, what the board is looking for from the system itself, what the board is looking for, and within that you see that's where we have the crossing guard statement, that we participate in the determination of where a crossing guard will be located, but it is ultimately up to local law enforcement to make that decision. We then have a section for the parental responsibility, what our expectations are there. And in G, you'll see that we've added the statement that parents are responsible for providing transportation in the event FCPS is unable to, due to an emergency exceptional condition. We've added a student responsibility section. It's very straightforward. We expect you to comply with the student code of conduct when you're on the bus just as much as if you're in the classroom.
Big one.
The next section is largely unchanged as well, the student eligibility for bus transportation. One thing we did do is we deleted the D, which is addressing students attending designated primary schools. So the way it was written before, if you lived next door to a primary school and attended that school as a K through 2 student, you got a bus for that walk to the next building, to walk across the street. It didn't make a lot of sense to treat our primary schools, which are K through 2, any different than we treat our students who go to elementary school and are in K through 2. So we are proposing that we combine the elementary and primary school to have the same expectations and take out any notion that if you are a primary school, no matter where you live, whether it's next door or 2 miles away, you're gonna get the bus. 2 miles away? Yes. Next door? No. We have created this idea of mandatory exceptions regarding transportation. These are things we absolutely will do. And then there's permissive exceptions that are within the superintendent's discretion. They were already in there. We just are articulating them in a slightly different way. And then the remainder is really unchanged. Dr. Lebo, anything you want to add?
Nope, you hit it.
So the recommendation is that we advance this to the board with the proposed edits.
So will E become D and just move up? Because it references D and E, but we've taken out D. So-
Yes.
Okay.
So DE will become D and so forth, and we'll make sure we go through in case there are any cross-references.
Okay.
I have a question about number 3, the student responsibility piece. So they're expected to abide by the code of conduct while riding on the bus. What about the conduct while they're at the bus stop? I know it says parents are responsible for their kids from the moment they leave the door until they get on the bus. However, there's been a lot of debate or discussion about, well, they had a snowball fight at the bus stop. Or there was, bullying at the bus, something happened at the bus stop. And I feel like the guidance in the past, at least to families, was the bus stop is considered, you're at school property, kind of like being on the bus. So I wonder if we need to clarify that a little further.
That's a tough one because of 2A. 2A says parents are responsible for the safety conduct of children from the time they leave home until they board the school bus. So,
And I think we do have reference, I believe, in the bullying and harassment, provisions of those policies and regulations that speak to, bullying, whether it occurs at the school or on the bus or at the bus stop.
we have taken action on issues that have
Right.
occurred at bus stops.
Yeah.
Or
Yes.
other places, that's what I was gonna say, there's a behavior that happens elsewhere, not at a bus stop, not at school, but continues in school. And that's
I think that, what you're just talking about, to me, doesn't necessarily have to do with the transportation of students, has to do with student discipline.
Okay.
But yeah, yes, I mean, I think it's sort of the question, the difference between are we responsible for it and can we enact consequences? I would sort of go with the latter, right? So there are no staff there to be responsible for the safety and supervision, but could we address an incident and enact consequences? Absolutely. That's your discipline. That would be the same for anything else, but it doesn't have to do with transporting them necessarily. I think it's an important point.
And we have.
Yeah.
We have given consequences.
Yes, we have.
100%, 100%. And many times, part of what you discover when you do these investigations is that there was not a supervising adult at the bus stop. And so sometimes the follow-up is to say to a parent, we really need you to get, you or another trusted adult to be with that child at the bus stop because they're having trouble controlling themselves, making good choices, things like that.
Middle school.
Especially in the winter. As a former, the winter, and as a parent, it's like, yeah, so this is the day I'm not going to the bus with you, right? And I think also when you look at sort of the evolution of people's work schedules, not everybody is home to be able to get their kids to the bus. And so we rely on our children to be somewhat independent and walk down the street and do all that. So elementary is probably the bigger issue, actually. middle and high schoolers are usually just staring at their phones.
They're tired.
Still trying to work it out.
But elementary school bus
One
stops are
positive.
better attended than PTA meetings, so.
That is true.
There are more parents huddled around a.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's where you get all the information, right?
That's true.
Had our pop-up meetings right at the bus stop.
Yeah.
I have a question, but it's not necessarily something I would want to see in the policy, but bus driver authority under kind of student discipline. What's that process? So do we speak to that at all?
In the code of conduct is there, but did you
Code of
all?
conduct it does, and so bus drivers, similar to other staff, have the ability to do things like write referrals and communicate with an administrator, and oftentimes it's a partnership. We don't want to jump to things like referrals typically. Our counselors who know our students very well are often great resources to come on a bus and look at potential seating assignments. That's also listed in the code of conduct. That's not a disciplinary action. The driver has the right to assign seats in a bus. If as again, trying to, all the tools in the toolbox, but assigned seats is one of those, and we specifically call out that it's not a disciplinary action to do that. And so, but to answer your question specifically, they can write referrals, and the administrators would take action on those.
Got it.
And you can suspend children from the bus, it's a privilege.
Right.
Is there anywhere in any policy or regulation that we specifically address the bus driver's responsibilities around safety or, I know we got a question from the community about vehicles passing the school buses and that type of
Yeah,
thing.
and the red light.
So most of the requirements for drivers are what are specifically outlined in COMAR and related to their CDL license, which includes both a passenger and school bus endorsement. And so those requirements and those reporting requirements, to your point specifically on red light runners, all of that's reported. The problem is we don't have any authority. That's the one downside. We report, but the police can't issue a ticket based on the report. They do, to their credit, they do send them a nastygram in the mail, like, that you were observed doing this. That's covered in annual training for our drivers, and then as part of the onboarding as well.
And we had this discussion previously in years past with the sheriff's department about the cameras, correct?
Correct.
Even though we found out the company that the cameras would be free, it's just the sheriff's department would be required to issue the citations,
Law enforcement.
verify the photographs, and they determined it wasn't worth it.
So there was a pilot years ago, long before my time here, and basically the outcome was we weren't getting enough tickets, right? It's just because it wasn't rolled out fleet-wide, that it was.
Because it was just piloted, right? It was just a
It
small
was
pilot.
piloted. And I would say, one of the other challenges is the number of routes. And if the sheriff's office was interested in doing it again, we'd really have to be strategic as to where we are. Because we have a number of routes where I certainly understand their point to a certain extent, that the probability or the likelihood is slim. And so that's a lot of resources to put in and on those buses. The company that's doing it gets a portion of those.
Percentage, yeah.
A large percentage of it, just like the speed cameras or the red light cameras that are right out here that flash all day long. The company gets a large percentage of that, and so it's a question of, does it make more sense to put our resources towards enforcement on the ground, where we can actually pull people over and give a violation, which is a higher fine if they can do it, and try to spend their resources in that way. So from time to time, we re-engage with them to see if there's an interest, but truly it is, and I don't want to sound like I'm passing the buck. I certainly understand the complexities on their side of the house of, do we want to put our resources there, put it on the ground with deputies pulling people over to issue tickets.
Yeah.
There was legislation last year, and it's kind of vague because I don't think it applied to Frederick County, but it was sort of that, like if you had even a divided road, where like multi-lane divided road, everybody was going to have to stop. I don't think it passed because it's like, wow, how do you get that?
It might be in
So the
legislation.
law currently says if you're on a divided roadway, that opposite side of the road does not have to stop for red lights. I think the one challenge to that legislation, and I think we don't have a ton of good examples. Montgomery County has a lot of large examples where you might have 4 or 5 lanes on your
What's the real
side.
definition
Yeah.
of divided?
And it is we would try to avoid that at all costs, but even if you're in the far left lane, is your eye going to the bus in the far right lane, 5 lanes over? Obviously, we would hope that it is, but that is, it's a large distance there. So we would try to avoid that, but we don't have many instances where that would apply, because our roadway network is very different than it is in Montgomery County. So
Yeah, that's kind of what's in my
Yeah.
mind. I was like Montgomery, Prince George, I think was the one. So you think it's back in? I haven't seen that
I think
one.
it is. I think it's something that was reintroduced. I have another question, and again, not something I don't necessarily want to see in the policy, but do we do any safety kind of awareness training for the kids at the beginning of the school year, you know, like proper, like when you're loading on the bus, like don't walk behind the bus, walk in front, whatever that, you know, process is, just to keep them safe and they're aware of kind of walking, if they're loading onto the bus, that they're not putting themselves in danger.
So that is part of our driver responsibility in teaching behaviors that are appropriate, because that's also goes back to Comar and proper bus loading and unloading procedures. So they do that as part of their initial. We don't have a formal, but it is a good point. I'll make a note of, do we send reminders to families as we start the school year of best practices? But that is something that drivers address. And then that's also part of the routing process and determining where the appropriate location is for a bus stop. So as an example, you shouldn't block an intersection with a bus, right? And so making sure that you're at a point where it's a discharge that is near a curb and it's prior to the intersection, that is a visual cue for students to go in front of the bus as well. Just some of those simple things that are already part of our routing procedures and actually is a Comar requirement. But anyway, so we'll take a note and see if that makes sense. We've done that with walking to school, friendly reminders, but it's a point well taken in terms of best practices for bus safety as well.
I believe, it may have been the meeting I watched before getting on here, talked, and I don't know if it's in this policy or safety, but bus drills, and it was mentioned that, my recollection is that all kids participated.
I mean, bus evacuation drills?
Yes, and that may have changed. Walkers never did. Like, they would do it when they got there, and the teachers, we wouldn't even know that they might say, this is the day they're gonna do the bus evacuation drills. But it wasn't all the students, so walkers, because it was mention was made of like on field trips, then everybody needs to know how to get off the bus safely. So I just wondered if that had changed.
No, typically when they do bus evacuations, it's when they arrive on the bus, the students who are on the bus that day participate in the evacuation.
Would that fall under some of our safety drills?
Yeah, that may have been under.
It is not one of our safety drills, as Mr. Blundell outlines. Again, it's a Comar requirement, and we do it as part of that process, and it is for regular ridership, not for the entire student body.
Okay. Anything else?
I'm good, thank you.
Are we good with forwarding this on to the
Yeah.
board?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, can I ask one more question?
Yep.
So in C2, the preferred method for transporting students to and from school, do we need to say something about, because not everybody's gonna take a bus, because you're, outside of or you're not within the walking zone. Does that need to be specified? I don't know if that could cause some confusion.
Well, you could say the preferred method for transporting bus-eligible students,
Okay.
Yeah.
right? Or something like, I think it's about eligibility.
Yeah, I think that's a good.
Yeah.
That's a good point to add that.
Yeah.
add that.
Eligible student, or qualified, I don't know, whatever the language is, but I think that would.
Because that's a great point, because
It
we could
is,
have some
yes.
folks.
Yes,
We'll
yes.
use that to say, well, we should shorten the distance that we require walkers, because you said the preferred method is transport.
Surprised
Yes.
they weren't looking to see
Method
that
for
on the agenda.
transporting
'cause they're not here.
bus-eligible students, qualified students, or whatever.
Whatever the term is later in the
Dr. Lebo's friends aren't here
No.
today, so.
Can we talk about like trying to reduce encourage parents to have their kids ride the bus instead of dropping them off in school,
Always.
you know?
I think that's why they added
It's an
this
interesting
line.
I was gonna say, I thought that
It's
was.
it's an interesting thing because both are, sort of don't, it's just gonna sound terrible, the way I'm gonna say it as if with my principal hat on. You know, you're always on a slippery slope on some of your buses by having enough seats,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, you know, I don't know about encouraging them, but I think certainly I would have had those conversations with a family who had truancy issues or tardiness issues and were choosing to drive their children.
Right.
You know, and instead of taking the bus and they were always late, and I'd say, you know, you're eligible for a bus, what can we do to help get you on the bus? Sort of in that context.
I think that's a great point, because I've had this
kinda
discussion
thinking
with
that-
the principal about that he's had discussions with
Yeah.
parents who insist on dropping their kids off based on their work schedule, which doesn't match the Bell schedule,
Right.
even though they're bus
In the
eligible.
context of truancy and attendance,
Yeah.
yes, but not sort of generally speaking. We sort of let people get their kids to school as they choose. It's more of a service we're offering than a requirement.
I get it.
That's sort of how I would
get
think of it.
Just
Yeah.
thinking
Good.
of congestion too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Out
that's
on
true.
Oh, yeah.
Don't go down Route 80 at 2:30.
Market,
Yeah,
anywhere.
anywhere.
Those days when I have to pick up my son from elementary school, I get there like a half an hour before bell time, so I'm like third in line.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true.
There's broad stuff to do.
You have to start queuing up very early.
Oh, they do.
It's crazy.
Because if you gotta have that kid at sports practice or, you know,
I don't
whatever.
want to encourage that. I don't want to encourage it.
Yeah.
No, now I
But it
know.
happens.
Oh, I know, I know.
They're there
You know.
early. Yeah,
Oh,
Earlier
you know.
than 30.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, I've never been first.
Yeah.
I've never gotten there early.
I was never
first in line.
No, yeah.
It's
You
crazy.
have to make that your goal.
Okay,
I think you want me at my desk working.
move on.
That bus.
Can I ask a question? I hear go back to the agenda. Are we done with that one? I don't want to.
I was gonna say, can we just, we're gonna move that one onto the board for first reading.
I think we need a motion, and a second, and a vote.
I move that we move it on to the board.
I'll second.
All in favor? All right, there we go.
So going back to the minutes, and I apologize, the schedule, planned agendas, bottom of the minutes, where it lists all the policies and the dates, at the end it says I/D/A. Is there a key,
Information, discussion, action.
is there a key that tells what those are?
No.
Can add
I mean, we can add that, but it's not
The
there.
public is looking at that?
Yeah, we can add the IDA equals information, discussion, action.
Good point.
And that roadmap has now changed. Because 111 and 410 are now being pushed to the March meeting, which meant the March meeting, I had to push some things in from March into June, to leave May alone. So, yeah, that roadmap is flexible.
Yes.
Yes.
It's pencil, not pen.
I
Well,
was gonna,
it's
I was
the
gonna
minutes.
tell Dr. Lebo to
Yeah.
tell Fred we didn't do anything crazy with transportation.
Yeah. Well, it's the minutes, you can only go on what you were saying then, and that changes.
He's always worried. Impacts his blood pressure. All right, so 1.07, policy 119, communicable diseases.
So the communicable disease policy was born out of discussion on August 28th, 2024, about policy 409, which is the promotion of health and wellness in students. The discussion at the time was it may make sense to pull the communicable diseases out of that policy, make it a standalone policy, since it's really applicable to more than just students. It's applicable to staff, it's applicable to visitors. It stands alone as a board initiative applicable to everybody. So we have created policy 119, the newest in the 100 series.
Top end? Is that the highest number now?
That is so far the highest number in the 100 series now.
Okay.
And they are not necessarily
Rank ordered.
well, sequential, so there are gaps. There are gaps.
Understood, okay.
We articulate a two-part purpose here, to establish a policy that prioritizes health and safety of students and staff, and also to establish your expectations as the board regarding what to do to report communicable diseases. We've incorporated 5 definitions. The definitions derive from a variety of sources, the Center for the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, the Maryland Communicable Disease Summary from COMAR. So we did some research to pull definitions that were understandable and also applicable. We've established, or we're proposing, 2 policy statements promoting a healthy environment and addressing communicable diseases. That all goes back to that purpose that was up initially in Section A. We felt it was important to reference immunizations because there are communicable diseases that we have immunizations for. But the reference is really just, yeah, it's there, but you go look at Policy 409 because that's really the policy that speaks to immunizations. And then the next 2 sections are really just a statement regarding your expectations on reporting of communicable diseases. We will report it, and we'll report it to the Frederick County Health Department. That there's joint responsibility for communicating about communicable diseases shared by the superintendent and the Frederick County Health Department, and then directing the superintendent to implement a regulation to provide school personnel with the information that they need. We did share this with our partners at the Frederick County Department of Health before we brought it forward. That's part of why we wanted as much time as it took to get this for you in front of you, because we wanted to give them a chance to weigh in. They didn't really have any suggestions or edits. They liked the approach that we were taking. I will do my best to answer any questions you have. My subject matter experts are off at an MSDE presentation, so they're not able to be here today. So I will do my best, but the recommendation is to advance this to the board.
I do have a question.
Sure.
Do we need to speak to HIPAA or privacy or any of that in this? When it comes to reporting?
Be added in as an extension of A, maybe?
Yeah, I
Just
mean,
the notion that
We follow all guidelines and regulations
Yeah.
associated with it.
that doesn't absolve us of reporting. We have to report.
Yeah.
Correct.
But we do not disclose anything that's other than on a need-to-know basis.
Yeah,
Yeah.
With that addition. It'd probably make people more comfortable.
yeah, absolutely.
I did have one question, and in the definition of infectious disease, of course, we would never list them, but I just want to make sure I understand. We're talking about everything from, is lice an infectious disease? Like, are we talking about, I'm trying to think of what I used to see, right? Hand, foot, and mouth, lice.
It says transmitted by insects, other animals.
Insects, right? Like, so I just,
but the lice themselves are not the infectious disease. It's the Lyme disease that lice
okay, so it's,
give you that is the communicable disease.
but the health department staff.
That's ticks.
Ticks, I'm sorry, ticks.
But the health
Sorry,
department.
thank
Yeah,
I knew that didn't sound quite right, but
that's ticks.
No,
I was trying to think, I'm like, I'm not familiar with that relationship, but,
sorry,
the health department nursing staff, which is important for the public to always know, do not work for us. Have their own training, they know which diseases they're supposed to report on, correct? Like, that's not the principal's job or the teacher's job. That call, that connection to the health department is initiated by their own staff who are in our school, right? Just to be clear.
yes, and that's why there's a statement in there that it's a shared responsibility for reporting and for communication.
Okay, so the designated personnel,
Well,
gotcha.
under, it says any person with knowledge of suspected or confirmed cases
They're supposed to tell
is
it.
responsible for reporting this information, okay, to the school. No, sorry.
Yeah, like you're supposed to call the school and say, my kid just tested positive for walking pneumonia or TB or whatever it is. You're supposed to, we rely on people to self-report.
And we do have a regulation in place. It's 400-21, management of pediculosis, which is head lice.
Oh, there you
I
go.
know.
Management of pediculosis, parentheses, head lice.
That's right.
Knock on wood, I never have.
I knew we had it, I just didn't know, didn't remember the number. And thank you for correcting me on lice and ticks.
Yeah, it's like, lice is
Never had
bad
that
enough all on its own. It's
All right.
better now than it used to be, but
Dodge
the
that one.
idea of having to wash all your clothes and bag up all your stuff down, like.
You really lived until one of your kids has been in class with someone with lice.
And mine happened. I never was. That was a knock on.
right.
That was probably one of the few times my whole house got cleaned.
Yeah.
It's sterilized,
Is there
yeah.
anywhere in policy or regulation where we address when students should stay home?
Yes, I know it's there.
I
It's not in
think
here.
in somewhere else. Hold on, give me one second.
not- and it's not in 409.
If you've seen
No.
24 hours, I know it's in there. Somewhere.
Yeah.
I would hesitate to put something like that into policy because the guidelines for that can change, and that's not going to be something that the board decides. That's really going to be driven by the Pediatricians Association or the Center for Disease Control.
If I was to guess, sort of at your interest, in the attendance policy where it dictates an excused absence for illness, it sort of could be perhaps subsumed inside of that idea that if you are not well, you should not come to school, and that's an excused absence. The idea of how long, I mean, I don't know, conventionalism's always been 24-hour fever-free and stuff like that, but I don't know that that's our regulatory obligation. I think that still belongs to the health department. I'm not sure.
I just wonder, when you look at the policy purpose, and it says this is to outline the Board of Education, Frederick County, expectations regarding the management of communicable diseases within the school setting. Well, one of the ways to manage communicable diseases is to
Exclude them.
advise your student to remain home when suffering from a communicable disease.
There is a communicable disease regulation already in place. It will be up for review and revision. We try and time the revisions to regulations to coincide with when the board will approve the policy. And so I think we can talk and have our resident subject matter experts who aren't here weigh in the regulation.
If we should just add a line that
Like, as
says,
per current guidelines.
Yeah.
Something like that, so we don't have to
not
update.
putting any specifics about fever or runny nose or whatever like that, just saying, consider keeping your child at home.
Do we do any testing within the, like if you show up to the nurses, office here?
Yeah.
But I mean, like, so say this kid's, coughing and coughing and coughing and coughing to determine whether or not it is?
I don't think we do. I think the nurse's mandate would be to pick up the phone, call mom and dad and say, come pick up your kid. They need to take them to urgent care or to the pediatrician.
I think I found something that will help, and we could probably make it a reference. But the Frederick County Health Department has guidelines, and they're guidelines. It says, there's like 6 questions, and it says, if my child is not feeling well, when do I keep them home from school?
Oh.
And it says, here are some helpful guidelines. A temperature of more than 100 for more than 24 hours, nausea, vomiting, stomach ache, diarrhea, pale or flushed face, headache, persistent cough, earache, thick discharge from the nose, painful sore throat, rash or infection of the skin, red or pink
I was
eyes.
gonna say, the pink eye's gotta be in there.
But so to your
Just a
point, we
reference
can
to that.
reference at the Frederick County Health Department.
Yes.
You could put a
Yeah,
link.
but it's on the Frederick County, it's health.frederickcountymaryland.gov.
Yeah.
And we could just reference that they provide those guidelines, and that's what they call them, guidelines.
Yeah. I think that's very helpful, because now when they go to the health room, they can take their temperature, they can put a bag of ice, they can put a Band-Aid.
But they can't give a Motrin.
Right. Without, no, the parent, does the parent have to come get it, or do you have to have a note? I think the parent has to come
Yeah,
get it.
otherwise you'd need an authorization to prescribe medication. But I do think, and it doesn't happen often, but there are times where, let's say a child is in the duration of a cold, and you feel like they're ready to go back to school, and they come to school, and within minutes of being there, it's very clear they're not ready to come back to school, and you might call a parent and say, and the kids are, they're so sweet. They're like, well, my mom told me to just try.
Yeah.
As a mom, I'm with you, right? It's like,
Yeah, totally.
so, and then the nurse has to call and say, your child, it looks like they still have a mild fever and it hasn't been 24 hours, and, there's some tension there.
Yeah.
And so I think just that reference point being the health department is going to be helpful to our staff.
Yeah. I think that's important, since
I
we're
think that's a
dealing
good
with
call.
communicable
Yeah.
diseases. We should at least reference that.
We can add that link.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's great.
Great.
Oh,
Therefore, with that added addition, are we comfortable with forwarding this on to the board for first reading?
Just one other thing I want to point
Yes.
out, if you go down to the additional resources, the related information, and you jump down to 5, the FCPS regulations, we have already designated certain regulations to be renumbered Even though those are not the numbers now, you see at the end it says formally, so the first one, Regulation 11901, Communicable Diseases, formerly 200-26. It is currently still 200-26.
Okay.
And if you go to our policy page and you're looking for that, you need to look for 200-26. But when we get the revisions done, it will become 11901. We're doing that here now, so we don't have to come back to the board to make a technical amendment later.
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
So now we need a motion.
Motion to move it forward?
I'll motion to move this forward to the board.
Second.
All in favor?
It's first reading, right?
Correct.
And then-
The first reading.
Now, 1.08, promotion of health and wellness.
1.08.
Yes, policy 409.
I had it open and I lost it.
You need a hard copy.
No. I just need to open up the right tab. Give me 1 second, I apologize.
No problem.
The communicable diseases, the red line version had no red lines.
There it is.
Brand new.
Yeah, they call it doesn't need to be labeled as red line per se because it's a brand new policy.
It's helpful
It's
though,
just-
actually.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
stay consistent.
Yeah.
So policy 409, promotion of health and wellness students. It was presented also on August 28th, 2024 for information and discussion. And we are proposing some edits consistent with that conversation. The first of which is to retitle the policy to student health and wellness. This will align it with consistency, for consistency's sake, with the with the staff health and wellness. We are enhancing the policy purpose, adding student safety to health and wellness. We've provided a number of definitions, and we have been working very hard to make sure our definitions are consistent across policy and regulation, so we're all using the same definition unless there's a particular reason not to do so. So we've been working very hard to make sure we do that. In the policy statement, we've added to what already existed in terms of what the board's policy is, to add that it's part of our strategic goals to foster student wellness by creating a culture that promotes and protects health, well-being, and ability to learn by supporting healthy eating and physical activity. That is a critical part of health and wellness for students. We know that getting a good night's sleep. I know, Mr. Rose, this is something that's important to you because you've raised the bell schedule. Getting a good night's sleep, making sure students are fed, those are important to ensuring student success in the classroom. And so we thought to incorporate that into the policy statement made a lot of sense for the board. The
We
content-wise.
should probably take that into account when we're asking our kids to get up at 5:30 in the morning, shouldn't we?
That is a different discussion for a different day.
You had to throw it in there.
That's a part of this policy.
I kid.
One of these days, a billionaire's gonna see the
Exactly.
wisdom and give us the money to do it. That's my dream.
Boy, that is hopeful.
I know.
Yeah.
It would be wonderful if they did. So we tried to highlight here in the body using the red line where the particular sections come from, since we are taking 420 and decommissioning it and folding it into 409. So the sunscreen use was already in 409. It remains in 409. We have really done nothing more than just clarify the language. The joint responsibility with the Frederick County School Health Council, again, that has always existed. It is a partnership we have with the Frederick County Department of Health, and so that's really not a lot of change in that one. The physical examinations and the hearing and vision screening came out of 420. Instead of keeping them in a single paragraph, we've split them out so they each stand alone. So physical examinations is 1, hearing and vision screening is 3, and hearing and vision screening is 4. We did condense, we took out language that as staff, we felt was either regulatory or aspirational and not necessarily directive as to what the expectations are. So while we certainly understand and wouldn't disagree with the statement that hearing loss is the most common developmental disorder identified at birth, that's not really a policy statement, and there's nothing really that follows along with that we felt it needed to remain in there.
I appreciate you.
The immunization language is still there. That came out of 420. We've added just to clarity that the board's expectation is that the principal will enforce the immunization regulations in collaboration with the local health department, and that really means the school nurse or the health tech that's assigned to that school. Then we've added as paragraph 7 a statement from the board as part of policy that we will create regulations consistent with the state's requirements for telehealth. This is a new law. We have no choice. We have to create a policy, and it seemed the flexibility of putting the specifics in regulation made more sense, and I don't think when the state says the schools are required to have a policy that they care whether it's in the policy per se or whether it's in a regulation, which is how we implement the board's policy. And so what we chose to do here is just make the simple statement that the board is acknowledging that that is an obligation we have and telling the superintendent, make it happen.
I think it's important, it bears worth noting for the public listening, because we've had some areas of tension with sort of this idea of students accessing mental or other health services, that this House Bill 522, which governs the requirement, has a parental consent component. So I think it's really important for families to know that we have to have a dedicated space, we have to have internet access, we have to make telehealth available, but it's through their insurance provider, and it's with parental consent. And so I think that's just, we're sort of a coordinating body in this way, and I just think it's important for family. I would want to know that my 12-year-old can't just make an appointment. Yeah. 15-year-old cannot just make an appointment, or of that nature without my involvement and without my knowledge, and I just wanted to make sure that was really clear.
Good.
Do we speak anywhere about parents who do not vaccinate their kids? Are there exceptions?
That's in Comar.
In Comar, and so
Yeah.
generally, all students are required to be vaccinated unless you have a medical or religious basis for not vaccinating.
That's longstanding practice.
And then they just have to.
There's a form that they fill out that, they have to note that they meet the criteria.
Okay.
And
So
the Comar link is there.
Okay, do we address that in the regulation at all? Do we do that in the regulation?
It just says that in terms of,
And I apologize, because I didn't.
Well, we just say
read that
parents
thoroughly
must
enough.
provide proof of required immunizations, blah, 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 and then we go on down, and
I mean,
under related information, we link the required immunizations through Comar.
if you were looking for, if you were looking to add a clarifying statement, maybe in A, you could say, Maryland law requires immunizations except for those meeting exemption requirement, or something. You could just signal that there is an exemption process.
I mean, and that is the very first statement in Regulation 464.
There you go.
Maryland law requires evidence of complete primary immunizations
There you
against
go.
certain childhood communicable diseases for all students in preschool through 12th grade who enter a Maryland public school for the first time, regardless of age. And then it talks about students who have a medical or religious exemption may be admitted without immunizations, and then there's,
Okay.
so it is in the regulation, and
Good,
the-
that's fine then.
the regulation hasn't been amended since 2005. It's 20 years old. It's on the list of those regulations that we need to come back and take another
This
look
one
at.
through, it's gonna just continue triggering.
Yes.
Okay.
And like I said, that's been our process, is trying to get the regulations ready so that when, because we know that once we get done with policy committee, it's a good 6 months before we're actually getting this approved through 2 readings before the board. And so staff have time, they can take what policy committee does, approves, and kind of tailor it. And then if there's board changes, it's usually a tweak, not a wholesale change.
Right, right. Because like we talked about today, that the first reading for this might be June.
Or later.
Yeah.
Maybe June or July.
Yeah. And then depending on what happens to it, it'll be another 3 months.
Right.
One thing I just want to note, and maybe Nikki, this is, or Zoe, this is for the telehealth, it's a related matter. The telehealth, whatever we come up with, we're required to publish that in our student handbook, or I don't know whether that means a code of conduct or the calendar handbook, or some way we have to publicize it. So I just wanted to make a footnote.
Yeah, and Mr. Falls
He's on it?
is on it.
Okay.
And I've talked to Dr. Bingman about it as well, so they're aware and they're working on it. And I think our goal is to try and get it in front of RRC in April.
Then we'll meet that
It'll
deadline.
either be April or the first one of the next fiscal year.
And Dr. Serger, I'm glad you brought up with the telehealth that parents have to give permission. I know our state organization, MABE, did vote against that one initially because people were not necessarily, the makers of the motion or the bills were not necessarily thinking, well, you have to have dedicated space, time out of the schedule, but you have to have staff to monitor. And
Yeah.
that sometimes is the biggest. You can't just send a kid in a room with a TV screen.
Yeah, I would say from educators in general had some challenges with this, and it went through, so we're gonna do our best to implement it as expected.
So I think, I do have a question, but I'll wait until after the motion is, and it is not particular to this policy.
Okay, so do we have a motion to move 409 to the board for first reading?
I'll move that we do that.
Second?
All in favor? All right. Get it on there.
And I just want to say thank you for the Oxford comma.
You're very welcome.
I like the Oxford.
I do as well. I had to explain to Nikki a little bit about the Oxford.
They don't do is this like, before the word and that?
Yeah.
You will never break me of that.
I know.
I fully object to it.
It's clearly, anyway. That's just
I
my,
used to have some great visuals that when I was an adjunct at a law school teaching legal writing, I had some great visuals for that. I'll see if I can dig those out and share them.
Yeah,
So
my
do-
wife is such a shamer. English degree.
Has there been any discussion or talk around redoing how we present our policies and regulations on the website?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, this is an upgrade, remember.
Oh, yeah.
You talked about that
I
at one of the
appreciate
meetings
all
before
of
I
the
came.
background information being added.
Yeah.
But I feel like it would be, we would better served by grouping it under kind of categories. So like health and wellness, you know what I'm saying? So that you have those connections between all of the,
We've tried to handle that through the numbering.
Right.
know,
And,
I
and,
know,
the, and the
but-
number series is 100 is board, 200 is operations, like physical plant
but even if we
operations.
had it like that, like all the 100, all the 200s, I'm just throwing
It does
out
have
there.
that function, it allows you to sort it that way.
number.
So we try to give people want it for all different ways. You can sort it by policy and reg, you can sort it by number, you can sort it by responsible office.
Well,
I think it would be helpful if on the site, we actually put it here on the very first link.
Like a key.
100 is this, 200 is
Yeah.
this, 300 is this, just so they know.
Yeah.
I mean, we are working on, Nikki and I with our IT staff are working on an update to the landing page for policy and regulation. We've got some ideas for how to
That might be
really
a good
enhance
place to
it.
put it, yeah.
Yeah.
One thing we could talk to IT about whether the application we use for housing the policies and regulations, what Dr. Sergo was referring to as sortable, whether we could add another column for tags. So you could tag health, and then if you search for health, all of the ones that have that tag would come
Okay.
up. I don't know that that's possible.
It doesn't always get you what you want.
Well, so the search actually does search all of the
It gets you
policy
more than you
itself.
want, is the thing.
That's-
That could be.
you search the word health, you're gonna get every policy that
Right.
uses the word health at any point.
Yes.
So we can talk with the IT team about, how we can, could we do tags to make it a more efficient search? Or, then of course we'd have to come up with what those tags are, but I think that's certainly something that's
But
doable.
yeah, I think it would be helpful just as soon as possible if we could add a key to the landing.
That we can,
Just let people know what 100 series, 200, all the way through.
Yeah.
And maybe
pertains
some
to.
language around if you use the sort type, it would give you,
Yeah.
you know,
That I think needs to live on the
That
landing page. I don't know
Yes.
that the
I think that's
application
what
page
they call that.
itself
Yes.
would be able to accommodate that.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, that initial landing page having some
It-
I do
keys.
hesitate to create more work around the policies, but,
No, and this is something we've been thinking about anyway, and we've been working with our IT team.
We work so hard to make these policies readable and
Yeah.
information, we ought to make it easy for them to find it.
If I remember right, you referenced Anna Rundle, I'm so sorry, you referenced, I think it was maybe Anna Rundle's policy page? I thought one of the meetings I watched, somebody referenced. And I looked at that one and it didn't catch my, so I could have that totally wrong. But yeah, I think the idea of whatever you can do to make it.
I mean, every
We've come a
LEA,
long way.
every LEA handles it a little differently. Some use board docs as where the policies and regulations live. Some keep it on their own homepage. Some have an application like we use, which is that table that's sortable and searchable.
Yeah, I mean, you know, in Montgomery, where certainly Mr. Blivis and I both were, although we didn't do policy work to the extent there, they do have it sorted by topic, but their whole numbering system is a lettering system around those topics.
Right.
So it's no easier to find anything, I'll just say that.
It's not.
But, yeah, let's try and upgrade. Were you gonna say, Nikki?
Yes, so I just wanted to add that we are working with IT to come up with some type of graphic that explains how the policy goes through.
Okay.
oh, that's a great.
How ability.
Oh, that's
How
good,
about
too.
a song, the law?
Yes, I was gonna say, how about a
Great.
song, Schoolhouse Rock?
That's great.
Just a lonely bill.
And that was actually the generation of that idea. I was like, you know what? I would love to see a Schoolhouse Rocks. Here's how
that's so
we're
good.
going to establish a policy.
And then we get our students at AFA to work on it.
Yeah,
I see it all now.
yeah. And CTC can film it.
That's
and
right.
there we go.
Video.
Yeah.
We are working on some upgrades to the landing page for the very reasons that we've all discussed to improve transparency, improve understanding, because it does take a long time to take an existing policy and update it. And we've had policies that have come back to policy committee 3 or 4 times. So there's 4 or 5 months right there. And then it's not like we're able to just, okay, next board meeting, this is on the agenda. You know, we set these agendas out and, you know, we plan out when they're going to be, you know, when we're going to be able to do things.
I think that's a great idea, honestly. I
Yep.
just think that the more we can give the public on process and procedure, yeah.
Right, because we were getting all those emails and public comment, you need to put this, you know, and it happened to be 443, but it could have been anything, on the board, you know, agenda that night. And it's like, that's against open meetings, that's not how the process works.
not how it
And it's just- you know, it's like, that, and so people didn't understand and they didn't know, so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so do we have to do the decommission?
Yeah.
I mean, we'll just mention it. Agenda item 109 is policy 420. This is a proposed decommission because the content is either going to be found in the communicable diseases or it's going to be found in policy 409. Great. So we will keep it together as a companion
Okay.
because they go together.
So we'll move on to 1.10, policy 417, alternative education services, home hospital.
I have some guests. My subject matter experts are here for this one.
Only waiting?
My first job with Frederick County Public Schools was
HQ2.
yeah.
So, policy 417 was previously presented to the policy committee on October 23rd, 2024. That was an information discussion only, so we could understand what the board's interests were. It was adopted in 2006 and last revised in 2019, so it's got a little bit of tooth to it. The discussion at the time focused on updating the title, addressing health needs, providing additional definitions, and ensuring that the policy addresses those that it is intended to cover. Staff is proposing that we change the title to just Alternative Instructional Services. Ms. Shipman, if you want to explain why that particular title?
Primarily, just because it encompasses home and hospital teaching, but also student services instruction, which is defined, but it's not just in education, like in a home setting for home hospital. There's a couple different settings here that we've addressed. So it's just, and education, everybody kind of thinks about sitting in the, brick and mortar. And so we changed it to instructional because they're getting that instruction, but it may be a different, way, obviously, than your average student.
I understand that. My concern is, do we call Heather Ridge an alternative school? I'm in Leadership Frederick. They had a day where they presented, which I wouldn't have used this term, alternative. They had a charter school, a remote virtual high school, and I'm one of the Montessori charter schools. That's what they were calling alternative. And I was like, I wouldn't have called that alternative at all. So I'm just worried that there's a lot of use of the word alternative.
So alternative is okay, because okay.
Yeah,
We
and
could just
obviously,
eliminate that to outline instructional services for students during periods of absences due to verified health conditions.
Well, that would be a long
That's a
title
long
for
title.
a policy.
and it is more
The
than
policy
just
title. She
that.
talked
She wants the policy title changed.
Oh,
That would be a long.
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm way up on the top.
I'm under purpose.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that would be fine. Once
Well,
you
we would have to
explain
change
it-
that.
Yeah, no,
I think without getting in the weeds, I think the general definition of alternative applies to anything that is not a brick and mortar experience. You may want to add the definition
Oh, there you go.
that says what in this context, alternative instructional services refers to educational services provided outside of I don't know if we want to use the word brick and mortar, but a sort of, going to school in a building every day, and encompasses the range of those things. So it wouldn't include Heather Ridge, it wouldn't include a charter school, it wouldn't include, I think
but it would include the RVP.
not necessarily, because that is a virtual program that is part of the virtual school. Remember, school systems are only allowed to have one virtual school, which we have, and RVP is a programmatic delivery inside of our existing virtual school. So I think if you just define what you mean, it might cover your concern.
Yeah, that is absolutely fine, because I was bothered by some of these other usages of the word, and so as long as people understand.
The one question I did have that I was wondering about is the notion of these collectively about interim. Are these all interim services, meaning they could be of a short-term duration? So the only other, just throwing out ideas, that you could call this policy interim instructional.
Oh, I like that.
Because they're all different short-term solutions, right? So in fact, that was actually the name of the department that we had. It was called Interim Instructional Services. And so I would think about maybe that.
If you all
So
are in
you're saying
agreement, I think that's
substitute-
really clear.
Alternative, call it interim, which is these are the available things that we provide on a short-term basis based on needs. Your incarceration, home and hospital, illness, pregnancy, and I don't know, just, you think that's, okay.
That's a great word.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. So we would not need a definition for alternative?
No, we just call, I mean, it still may be helpful to because you're wondering about something that others may wonder.
Yeah.
If we don't use the term, we don't usually include a definition. 'Cause there's-
Understood, okay, fair point.
Right.
Fair point.
And so we're taking the term, when the term was the title, it's
Understood,
used.
Yeah, interim, yeah.
Yeah.
But I just don't know if people know what interim means, and I don't mean that in a patronizing way, but,
Well, we might add.
Well,
the
then we
definition.
divide it.
yeah.
Yeah,
put it
that
in
will
a
have to be
definition.
defined,
Yeah.
right? So that's.
Yep, so let's,
Oh, in fact, interestingly, under, what is this, 1A on the top of page 2, the word interim instructional services is used. So maybe that's cause to.
Law mandates the implementation of interim instructional services.
there you go.
We can certainly add a definition for
Perfect.
interim instructional services. So the policy's purpose was revised to take out the reference to incarceration, which was a concern for the policy committee when we met in October regarding this. We did incorporate definitions to clarify what is the HHT, Home and Hospital Teaching Program, what we've called student services instruction, and this is due to exigent circumstances. That is our way of saying incarceration without saying incarcerated without actually saying incarcerated. And then verified health condition, because that is a part of being eligible for these instructional services, the interim instructional services. We felt it was appropriate to provide a definition for what that might mean. The goal in the policy statement is pretty straightforward. It's to make sure that our students, even under those circumstances, are able to access their education. In the implementation, it's broken down into essentially 3 categories: home and hospital teaching, in which we incorporate the pregnant and parenting students; juvenile services instruction, which actually is not instruction that we provide. That is when a student is incarcerated at a juvenile facility, the state has their own education program, so they provide the instruction. Because of a change in the law, they are considered dual enrolled, so we still play a participating role. In particular, if they have an IEP, we still have to participate in the IEP process. I felt very strongly it was important to keep this reference in, because I didn't want to create a gap where where the community was wondering, well, we know what HHT is, we know what happens if a student is incarcerated at an adult facility, because that's when they get student service instruction. But what happens if they're at a juvenile facility? There was a gap there. And so I felt that it was important to at least include it, even though we're not really responsible for it, other than to say they are duly enrolled and still remain our students. Okay. And then the student services instruction, this is if they're incarcerated at a adult facility. And then the last piece is just the direction to create and ensure we have regulations for the implementation. Janet, did I miss anything?
Perfect.
So the recommendation is to advance this to the board for first reading.
With the changes that were recommended.
Yes, with the change to the title and adding a definition for interim instructional services.
Perfect.
I'll make a motion that we move this to the board for first reading with the changes that were recommended today.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Unanimous.
Oh, this really is so contentious.
I have another question too here, just for public comment. When we have, in typical board fashion, when we have an action item, we present a motion, before we go to a vote, do we need to start asking for public comment? If there is public comment in this situation?
I don't think so, because this isn't the final action by the board to approve.
Okay.
This is just a committee making a recommendation to the board. It is not an actual ultimate outcome decision. Typically, we don't have anybody from the public here, so it's not, it's not usually even an issue because there's no one here to comment. I mean, certainly if you want to open it up, if there's people present, it's your prerogative to do so, but I don't think it's required.
So the one thing, and take this for what it is, Robert's Rules doesn't actually require public comment before an action is taken. That has been a practice in Frederick County, but most school systems do not ask for public comment before board votes. There's a public comment period, and people can come and speak to those items on the agenda. It's a practice here, but it's actually not a requirement under Robert's Rules.
So
Or open meetings.
Yeah, and I was kind of speaking to that. like,
Yeah, so the
that's
board
how
can certainly
what-
clarify that in its practice.
Yes, like.
You do not need to ask for
follow the
public
same
comment.
pattern of, yeah.
So honestly, I think the way you're running it in the policy committee is much more in alignment. I think there's been a generosity of public comment at our evening and work session meetings, but that is actually not required. It's just a gesture of the board.
Oh, believe me, we put many more parameters. I mean, we could say, for
You can
instance.
just say, public comment period is here to here, and that's
Well,
it.
It has to be on something that's on the agenda. I've talked to school board members in other counties all the time. Other counties, if they get a bunch of people, they make it 2 minutes. Otherwise, they leave it at 3. I mean, we were just talking about it the other day at Board of Directors.
I mean, certainly
And
at the
you don't have
board,
to have public comment at all.
Right.
Even there's no requirement to have a public comment section during any meeting. You can choose not to receive public comment. That has, again, not been the practice in Frederick County and would be a drastic
We may need to
change.
speak to that, because I think that there needs to be clarification.
well, and I think you
on
might,
that.
you may need to have an
Because
admin
our
function.
practice is different than what's required.
Yeah, we actually have an admin function coming up.
I think it's a great conversation for admin function,
Today.
that if you want to
I'm not-
rein back in and expedite the business portions of the board.
Is it on there?
Yeah.
You would say, we are not going to ask for public comment before the board takes a motion.
There you go, we're actually gonna talk about it today.
You have on your board meeting agenda an admin function section between the
There you go, it's timely.
the work session and the board meeting.
That's right, yep, so we do. So we are gonna talk about it.
It was there.
Yeah.
I don't know, we
agenda was
don't have
published.
It was coming up, did not realize it was,
Not involved.
I think I missed that, yes.
so yeah.
Okay,
There you go.
there we go.
You got what you need. Got your platform.
Never
As I
mind.
said, we've shuffled the roadmap a little bit, so I can give you the updated preview of what's coming.
Okay.
Not necessarily in this order on the agenda for that date, they're just listed numerically in my notes. On March 26th, we will have Policy 111, School and Workplace Safety. That will be an information discussion action. We will have Policy 208, Data Security. That will be an information discussion action. We will have Policy 401, the school calendar, information discussion action. Policy 410, fire drills, that's a decommission. Policy 426, fundraising in schools. I believe that is an information discussion, not action. Policy 436, school-sponsored publications and media student journalists. That is an information discussion, not action. And Policy 442, student data privacy, that is a decommission. So the agenda looks robust because there's 7, but 2 of them are decommissioned, so it's really 5. And 2 of them are just information discussion, I believe. On May 21st, that agenda has not changed. It is still just 443, transgender and gender nonconforming, and 444, educational equity and excellence. Those are both information discussion only. There will be no action. We are not coming with any proposed language. We are here to listen and hear what the policy committee wants us to do.
And I apologize, that's May, correct?
That's the May
That's
21st.
the
We have an
May,
April
and-
meeting.
Right, I knew that, which I would be
Yeah.
missing, but I knew that. So.
So I had on my notes from last time that 400 and 413, sorry.
Yeah, so 400 and 413 have been moved to the June 25th
June, okay.
meeting. 400 systemic delegation of duties, that has been moved to June. That would be an information discussion because that is the first time it's on. It's a very, very brief policy, honestly. 413, family community partnership, that is going to be an action. Dr. Loris Phillips asked that we move it to June because he needs more time, especially in light of the conversation of splitting it into 2 separate policies. If you recall, that's what we
Right.
discussed.
Yeah.
And then Policy 425, flag display and salute, and Policy 427, religious expression, will both be up for the first time, so those will be information discussion. And the good news is, on the June 25th meeting, Dr. Loris Phillips will be here for Family Community Partnership, but the other 3 policies really fall within my team's wheelhouse. So it'll be a more intimate crowd because we are the subject matter experts for this one.
Okay,
These.
great.
All right, great, thank you.
General question, if we want some information that we think we can't get ourselves by just doing our own research that we do all the time, how much lead time do you need?
How much lead time can you give?
Okay, I can give you questions.
The more time you
Email them?
Yeah, the more time you can give us, it gives us more time to conduct a more thorough search. If you email us the night before, I'll get you something, but it may not be much. If you email me tomorrow for something in May, that gives Nikki and I and my team time. I can ask my Michael or Michelle if needed to help with assisting in that research. It just depends on how robust the question is.
And is it best to send those to you, or if there's somebody else in the system to run it through Dr. Dyson, just best to send them right to you and let you contact that person, or?
Can you give a little bit more detail about the nature of the?
Yeah, so with sports in our county, like where Kevin Kendrow might be the subject matter expert, still go ahead and email the questions to you and
Send it to Dr. Dyson.
Yeah, I mean, it should go to Dr. Dyson because I think that's the practice for questions from the board, that they go to Dr. Dyson.
All right.
Certainly you can copy me on them, and then I think just let me disseminate them out to, if it's an athletics question, yes, it will go to Kevin, but let it come through Dr. Dyson and me.
And I'll copy
That's
you
been
all.
mine, is send it to Dr. Dyson, CC the pertinent whether it's Dr. Bennett.
I wouldn't go beyond sending it to a cabinet member. So, I mean,
Always Dr. Dyson, and always copy the full board, which I think is one of the norms we follow, and she'll.
Yep.
All right. Yeah, full board, probably, I was gonna copy them, but full board makes sense.
Yeah, full board.
Depends on what, again, without knowing what it is.
Yeah, no,
Because
just.
that's the way she's gonna respond. She's gonna
Yes, she's
respond.
gonna
to the full
respond,
board, so.
and they're gonna need the information later down the line anyway, when the policy comes to them, so.
Yeah, and I think that it's sort of, if I'm reading into a little bit about what you're asking, I think we're in a really interesting time right now where there is some incongruence between the federal level and the state level. And so I think there's a number of examples, whether it be Title IX, whether it be, gender affirming approaches, whatever it might be, where, most LEAs are just sort of not sure what to do. Because there's a tremendous conflict between the state guidelines and the federal. And so the last set of direction we got yesterday was something like the state is sifting through all that to provide us with direction about, to what extent do we need to go back and revise any of our policies or make adjustments. So there's also there's a tension there. I've been spending the last, and working with Nikki and of course Ms. Nguyen, looking back at our Title IX stuff to say, are we in alignment with what the expectations are following the 2020 guideline?
Right.
And so I think some of it is, the state is now saying, oh, but these things are still in place because this is our state approach. So I think it's a really interesting time for us where there's such incongruence and we're not sure which finger to follow.
Right. Well, and the idea that, executive orders may or may not apply if there's court cases, and so where are you in that?
So we're sort of in a recipient mode of direction. We wait for direction from the state board and the State Department, so.
Yeah.
I don't know, and you've been involved in many of those conversations too. We sort of get a little bit of no direction.
Yeah.
And I've had calls with the in-house counsel at the other LEAs. It seems like now we're having them once every 2 or 3 weeks. And the takeaway from almost every one of them is, we don't have an answer right now. We don't know. We're still waiting to hear. And as you said, there's litigation ongoing on pretty much every one of the executive orders. There's some kind of litigation.
We want to make sure we're in compliance, right? So that's sort of the ultimate thing. So you
just have to minimize our risks.
Exactly.
Exactly. I think the position I feel like the position we have to take.
Well,
is
but,
just that
yeah, I'm sorry.
No. Just, that, we do need direction. We need them to say something
Yeah.
definitively,
Correct.
because we're the ones at risk.
Right, exactly. And we want to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Right. They're
What I
not
will
gonna
say is
support
that
us when
similar to
we
what
sued.
we're sorting through, my discussions in Annapolis last week were that they are also sorting through
Right.
Title VII, Title IX, the 14th Amendment. They're also sorting through all of the,
Right.
And MSD and their team of attorneys coming out of the Attorney General's office are also poring over all of this. And we meet with Mabe and Pazam, and they've got sharp people, and there's just no definitive answer at this point.
yeah.
Well, and that's people, you see the emails that we get these emails and they're like, you need to change this right away. And we're like,
It's not
we
that
can't.
simple.
We haven't received direction, and sometimes it's for all those reasons.
Right, and to Ms. Allen's point, something that seems like simple, you should just change this to align with an executive order or federal thing. If we do that, then they still have recourse to file complaints and litigation with the State Department of us not following the State Department.
Right.
That's why we're in a holding pattern. We are not actively trying to resist or do anything that we're not supposed to be doing. We just aren't being given really confirmation of the direction. We're ready to take the direction once we get it.
Right, right. That's what I always tell people. You don't understand how many masters we have, We're not just free to do any old thing we want, and we're waiting to hear from you.
And we have a process as well. And we're in the 400 series. The 443 and 444 fall in that series. It's on the agenda, the scheduled agenda. This has been a known path that we were going to be on. And we have to follow our own process. We can't just decide because it's the hot topic of the day that we're going to deviate from our policy that says here's how we develop policy. Because we do have a policy on policy development.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yep. All right, are we ready to adjourn?
Thank you so much.
Yes.
We're adjourned.